All right, let's get started here. It's 8 o'clock. It's a minute after 8 o'clock. It's funny because just as I was about to flip over, just before I flipped over to start this, this is just funny because the first comment here, and I'll bring it up, is our good friend Pitt Chag, regular poster on the message board. I assume it's the same Pitt Chag and not an imposter Pitt Chag, saying tuning in for the Ado Theier watch, and like I don't know if can I share my screen here? Let me see. I can share my screen and show you what I was like looking at, like literally minutes before we started. Um, yes, I was watching a do the arrow highlights before we started. So it's kind of funny that just as we just before before we started this, I was watching Ado Theier highlights from last season at Kentucky, and sure enough, Pitt Chag says that he was looking for the Ado Theier watch as well. So I don't know. I mean, those highlights are pretty good. there's no doubt about it. Ado Theier, the Kentucky forward who's in the transfer portal, definitely a big topic of conversation for Pitt fans right now. We should talk about it right now before people jump in here. I should bring Jim in and we should just talk about Ado Theier right off the bat and then not again for the next 57 minutes. And people will keep asking about it. Be like, well, we already talked about it. And this is why you have to tune in at the beginning of the live stream and not wait until 8:30 like a lot of people do. You don't want to miss out on what we talk about at the beginning of the show. Is we talk about a lot of good stuff at the end of the show, but we also get into some conversation at the beginning of the show as well. But it's the live Panther-Lair Show. It's what we do every Wednesday night here at 8 o'clock on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak. Jim Hammett will join us in a minute or two from Panther-Lair.com, pittsburgh.rivals.com. People hate when I do the promo, but that's what we are here to do. Is the website's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. Lots of conversation on all of those topics on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. And of course, we have our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where we ask you to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. We have the daily morning Pitt videos. We do every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We have these live shows we do on Wednesday nights. We have post-game shows when there are games to talk about, and press conferences and practice highlights and all those different things. We have a lot that we do on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of it, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Pitt Chag says he's nasty, talking about Ado Theier, and he certainly is. Pretty intriguing player, and certainly if you could add him to Pitt's lineup, it would be quite a thing. Quite a thing. Let's bring Jim Hammett in here. Jim joined the conversation. Jim, we didn't even make it. I mean, you can look. I'll bring the comment up again from our from Pitt Chag. 7:59. Didn't even make it a minute into the show, and we already had an Ado Theier comment. But I don't know. So when you're in the waiting room there, it's like the green room or something before I bring you into the video. Can you see or hear what we're talking about, or can you hear me talking or see the video before I bring you in?
Yeah, it's just I'm backstage, but I'm still watching the actual
show. Okay. So you could see that I was watching Ado Theier highlights before. I just happened to I was like, I'm just gonna bring this up and take a look at it, for a couple minutes before, because there's a big thread on the message boards, of course, about Ado Theier and Pitt's chances of landing him and all those things. And I mean, we've been talking about it a lot on the message boards. We've been talking a lot about it a lot in our group chat, and I think we've had the same message for the last couple of weeks, right? That there's a lot of interest on Theier's part in going to Pitt. There's a lot of interest on Theier's family's part in having him go to Pitt. He likes how Pitt would use it. Everything fits except the NIL, right? It's got to come down to that, and it's not just about does the money fit? It's because Pitt's not going to be his biggest NIL offer, right? We know that, right? That's sort of generally accepted that for most high profile transfers, Pitt's probably not going to be the biggest offer. And even guys that they've been able to hold on to. Gavin Bartholomew could have got more money elsewhere, right? Kenny Johnson probably could have got more money elsewhere. Blake Hinson this past year could have gone somewhere else and gotten more money. And so there's there's going to be a discount element at play. The question is just how much of a discount. What's your, I don't want to say confidence level, but I mean, what percentage you put on it right now of Ado Theier landing at Pitt?
Well, I think a couple of days it came out that he announced the top 5, and of course it was Pitt, Kentucky, remain at Kentucky, Indiana, Arkansas, and North Carolina. And it seems like it's been Pitt and North Carolina the past couple of days. I think that's kind of been the general consensus. And people have been going back and forth. It's Carolina had a little bit of momentum. Then lately, the tides have. I don't know if the tides have turned, but there's a little more confidence out of the Pitt camp. So I don't know if there's a good percentage of it. What is it, 40%? Like, is Carolina 40, Pitt 40, and 10% the field? Does that sound about right?
Well, it doesn't add up to 100. So,
oh well,
you said
Pitt
40, Carolina 40 in the field 10. So that part of it doesn't sound right. Jim, I asked you for a number, and you gave me like a 90% rating on a 100% scale. So we're not going to put you in charge of the numbers anymore. But yeah, I guess right, Harrison Ingram going pro, right? That was the sort of impetus behind North Carolina surging here, right? Because that opened up an opportunity, you would think, right? Isn't that sort of the general consensus there?
Yeah,
as far as how Carolina boosted.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely their thought process, and I know they're still trying to look and find for an Armando Bacot replacement. I saw RJ Davis is coming back for what is this, his 5th, 6th season?
Good, I mean, God, really? I missed that. Are you serious?
Yeah,
RJ Davis?
Yeah, that came out today. I think he has a COVID year to use, so he's gonna be back. And I guess kind of like there's something that ties to that a little bit is that he's going to command a lot of NIL money, and he's not really a threat to get drafted. That's why he's coming back. So I mean, I think a lot of efforts are there to keep him happy. But I mean, I'm guessing North Carolina is a school with a lot of resources that they could probably take on RJ Davis and still go out and get who they want. But I don't know. I guess that could play a factor a little bit.
I wonder if Bacot. Wonder if Armando Bacot coming back like he did, if that influenced some other guys that were like, he was like, look, I came back, I got a decent chunk of money, and I get to have fun in college for another year, and maybe I'm not going to be a great pro, but I can get money, so I might as well like enjoy this college life. You know what I mean? And I wonder if RJ Davis looked at that and was like, hey, actually that makes sense for me too. Get some money, stay in college for another year. I made the joke the other day. We were talking about Izzy Abanikanda and Henry Parrish, how they were both in that 2020 recruiting class, and they were both committed to Pitt. And Abanikanda, 3 years at Pitt, and he's playing for the Jets. Henry Parrish, I'm sure you saw, is now transferring back to Ole Miss. So he's going to play his 5th year of college football. He was at Ole Miss for 2 years, went to Miami for 2 years, and he's going back to Ole Miss for another year. And I kind of was like, and Henry Parrish is transferring twice. Izzy Abanikanda is playing for the Jets. But you know what? Maybe Henry Parrish has it figured out, man, because he's gotten paid for the last 3-4 years, right? However long NIL has been an option. Certainly he got paid to go to Miami. He's getting paid to go. I mean, he got paid originally to go to Ole Miss, I'm sure, but he's getting paid a decent amount to go back to Ole Miss. He gets to be a college student. Like, college is awesome. Especially if you're a star football player. I mean, college, sure, you got to work, but it's not like you have like real world responsibilities that you'll have if you go out into the professional world. Like, maybe Henry Parrish has it figured out. Maybe, I mean, like, sure, Israel Abanikanda broke a Tony Dorsett record, led the nation in rushing touchdowns, was a draft pick of the Jets and all that stuff. But Henry Parrish gets to be in college. He could probably be in college for 6 years, actually, right? Because he was a freshman in 2020. So he could have a COVID year on top, unless he probably played enough in the first 4 years. This is his COVID year. But I mean, like, he's got it figured out. 5 years of college, getting paid to go to college. What would you pick right now? Being a running back for the Jets, or being in your 5th year of college, having spent 3 of those 5 at Ole Miss and the other 2 at Miami, getting paid for at least the last 3 years?
I mean, Parrish is definitely having a lot of fun. I mean, like, that's definitely, it's a cool gig. And like, I mean, like, going back to like the North Carolina guys, I mean, like, they're kind of like in a weird spot where they're not quite NBA players, but they're great college players. And like, all those opportunities to play in Europe are still going to be there. So like, if North Carolina is going to give me like $800,000 just to play one more year, yeah, I'm taking that. Like, because
Yeah.
like it's infinitely better to be a college basketball player than play in the G League or Europe. I mean, like you're still the star of the show. Like you're the lead on Sports Center. Like college basketball matters and people follow it. I mean, once you go to Europe, it's like okay, you come back and you play on the tournament team. You know, like the
The
basketball tournament.
TBT.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
You come back as an alumni player, and like everyone's like, oh, that's cool. But like no, but like people kind of forget about you. I mean, like you still have that college spotlight. So I could see where a guy like RJ Davis is like yeah, he was the ACC Player of the Year. He could be very well do it again next year.
Yeah. And like Baycott and Davis, like you're gonna like school guys all over college basketball. You know what I mean? If you somehow end up, if you go play pro, if you somehow end up in the NBA, you're gonna be playing against guys who are way more talented than you. And definitely a lot more talented than the guys you would be playing against, even in the ACC night in, night out. I mean, yeah, you might as well like live it up and have fun and win a lot too. I mean, Carolina should win a lot with RJ Davis, because they haven't lost. I haven't really kept track. Are you up on what Carolina's lost? I know Duke has lost like 10 guys or something like that
I
between
think Duke,
NBA and transfers.
I think Duke lost everyone.
Yeah.
Like the whole roster is starting over. I mean, maybe some guys will come back and circle around, but I think their entire roster went into the portal to the NBA. I'm not sure about North Carolina because yeah, with Ingram leaving, Baycott leaving, like I think they have a couple guys sticking around, but yeah, I mean RJ Davis is going to be the centerpiece, and like I think they already tried to go out and get one guy from Belmont. I think was their big transfer target.
Uh-huh.
But that's about it. I mean, but like obviously, like I'm sure we could look at their recruiting class and like they probably have multiple 5 stars, like all guys ready to play next year. That's the same thing with Duke. Like Duke lost everyone, but they could still be better next year because they have that Cooper Flag dude who's like probably better than anyone they have. So like teams like Duke and North Carolina, like I don't know if the portal ever really phases them. Like they're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
They'll step through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not. It's just funny to see that much. And it's not like Duke was bad this year. You know what I mean? And obviously you lose NBA guys. That's one thing, but it's funny to see like that. I was just looking up to see what that Jalen Blakes guy did. You remember that Jalen Blakes? Pitt tried to get him like late in the process, and it looked like they were in pretty good shape for him. And then Duke came in like right at the end, and he really never played.
No, Duke had a pretty small rotation, if I recall.
Yeah, yeah, and I think he got in that game at Pitt where they were just like crushing them. But he went into the portal. It's like, why would you leave Duke? Like, unless you were asked to leave or told you could go. You know what I mean? Like, I don't get why you would, take off. I mean, you're at Duke, and maybe he feels like he could probably actually play somewhere at a lower level. So maybe it was probably a good decision. But maybe he should have just gone to Pitt in the first place. But that's neither here nor there. We were talking last week about, we talked about it very briefly, but I fleshed it out a little bit more on the Morning Pit today about transfers that Capel has landed and kind of the success he's had with transfers. And, if you count, I was trying to like backdate the transfer portal era, and I went back to like 2021-22, which would have been like, the summer before the 2021 season, like Pitt football, obviously like Jordan Addison left like that next spring, right? 2021-22, Pitt added like the basketball. They got Burton, Mogi, and Dan Oladapo. I feel like that was the first real like transfer portal. Like, would you count that as like when the portal era started? Because the year before that was like Nike Sabandi, and he had to sit out a year, right? Because Miami was being a pain in the butt about it.
Yeah, it was still kind of like getting going. Then the 2021 football season obviously is whenever NIL started because that's whenever we did the Kenny Pickett show and he started doing all that stuff. So yeah, I would say that's probably a fair time whenever like this era of college basketball started.
I wonder if I'm trying to think of when maybe they lifted the 1 year like sit out period a year earlier. Because you recall, I'm trying to think like of transfers. Because actually, Sabandi I think came in 2019. I don't know if they added any transfers in 2020.
No,
but Lucas Krull played for Pitt football in 2020. I don't think he was a graduate from Florida. Let me look up when Nike Sabandi came here.
No, I think you're a year early on Sabandi. I thought he came around 2020.
Did he?
Yeah. Then like he had to sit out at first. Then they let him play. I think he eventually like played around the 11th game of the season. They were like petitioning.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, he played 14 games in 2020 and then got hurt the next year and then played 22, 23. Okay, so maybe 2020. No. Okay, so maybe 2021 was the start of the portal era. Anyway, if we count that as the start of the portal era, Capel's brought in 8 transfers in that span since 2021-22. It's like Dan Oladapo, Jamarius Burton, Mo Gee, Nelly Cummings, Blake Hinson, Greg Elliott, Ishmael Leggett, and Zach Austin. Like Oladapo played like 15 games. But like the other 7, and you don't have to call them all home runs, but that's really good. Right? I mean, like that's like pretty much all bangers. I mean, Zach Austin was, Zach Austin, but he was serviceable and he was a starter on a 20-win team. Greg Elliott averaged 10 points per game and started every game for a team that made the NCAA tournament. I mean, I don't know what kind of code Capel has cracked, but he's figured something out with the portal. And going over that list, I already had a fair amount of confidence about Cam Corn and Damian Dunn. But going over that list and seeing how well he has done in the last 3 years, 21, 22, 23, the last 3 years of the portal, kind of gives me a little extra confidence about Corn and Dunn, because these guys seem to have figured something out. Do you think they've cracked some kind of code as far as maybe they just figured out the fit, right? I mean, maybe they were able to hone in on what kind of guys fit. But and again, I know we talked about it a little bit last week, but what do you think there's anything they've sort of figured out here?
I don't know if there's something they figured out. I mean, I think early on in Capel's tenure, I think they would just try to get the best available player they could possibly get in every scenario. And sometimes, as we saw, there was some personalities that clash. So I think they've done a better job of finding guys that kind of are willing to kind of play how they play. I mean, like that those first couple years, it's just like, are you a living, breathing body that's pretty good at basketball? Yes, we will take you. That's how they got Xavier Johnson, Trey McGowan's. Like they just jumped on him because they had to. But I think as time has gone on, he's been a little more selective and he's gotten guys that fit. But like, I mean, obviously those 7 transfers, I mean, you're talking about 2 first team, all ACC picks, 2 6-man of the year. Mo Gee's playing in the NBA. Blake Hinson's going to play in the NBA in some form or fashion too. I mean, like that's tremendous. I mean, over the past 2 years, they've won 46 games, 22. And I mean, it's pretty good.
And it's not even like, I mean, you could say Blake came from a high major, but he really didn't. He was out of basketball, right? I mean, so he didn't. Yes, he came from Iowa State and Ole Miss, but it's not like, I mean, he wasn't playing there. And Burton obviously came from Texas Tech, but the other 6 guys are, I mean, it's Oakland, Stony Brook, Colgate, Marquette, High Point, and Rhode Island. Like they're not even like, they just have somehow mastered finding those guys who really fit. That kind of makes Dunn and Corn unique because they're coming from high major programs and places like that. It's I don't know. It's really interesting, and I mean, obviously, it's been key to the rebuild. Now, that's not to say they haven't done well with high school guys. Obviously, this year's class was really good, and Justin Champagny was really good, and the Twins look nice. But it's funny. So they also had 4 transfers prior to the portal era. Obviously, Nike Sabandi, Ethiel Horton, Sidi Nadir, and Eric Hamilton. Do you remember Eric Hamilton? What do you remember about Eric Hamilton? He started 20 games.
I mean, I remember he was like 6'9". I forget where'd he come from? What was the school?
UNC Greensboro, and before that, he played at Wichita State. So he'd been in like the NCAA tournament. This was the big thing about Eric Hamilton is he had experience in the postseason. He started 20 games for them, Jim. I have no recollection. If you put Eric Hamilton in a lineup with like Kevin Spacey, Gabriel Byrne, Benicio del Toro, Stephen Baldwin, and Kevin Pollak, I would know which one was Eric Hamilton because he'd be the only black guy in the group. But like, I have no, like, I wrote down his stats: 31 games played, 20 games started, 16 minutes per game, 5.5 points, 4.4 rebounds per game.
Yeah, those early teams, the big guy situation, you're talking about him, Terrell Brown. You remember Peace, I forget,
Ilagoma?
Yeah, he was around.
Yeah.
Kenna Chukwuka. I mean, like,
yeah. They were excited.
Those
Kenny was going to,
2019, 2020 teams. Yeah.
They had some flaws. Pitt Chag says he liked Eric Hamilton, and Hamilton
Like
started 20
He's
games
a good
because,
athlete, if I remember.
I guess, but he says this was the peak of the Terrell Brown era. So yeah, that's there's some dark years there. Some dark years for Pitt basketball, but it's pretty yeah, Eric Hamilton. That was a blast from the past. That was a name I did not remember. But we'll see. So, just kind of continue the basketball transfer conversation. I mean, obviously, Ado Theier is a primary target for that other spot. What do you think? Let's assume the best case scenario, they get Theier to use one of the two spots they have remaining. What do you think they do with the 13th spot? We've talked about this off and on. You think they just hold it, try and keep an eye out for a high school guy who emerges late? What do you think?
I mean, I can see them holding on to it, but I mean, I think you can always look for shooting depth and guard depth. I mean, I think the other day they reached out to Elijah Hawkins from Minnesota. I mean, that one seems unlikely just because, he's a pretty good point guard from the Big Ten, and a lot of schools are going to call him, and Pitt already has Jalen Lowe. So I don't even know why they even reached out. But I mean, I could, yeah, I mean, there's new guys going in the portal still, even to this day. I mean, I saw like an all conference guy that averaged 17 points. I forget what school he was from. I saw everyone talking about him today. I'm like, yeah, but that happens every single day. So, I mean, there's always going to be options, but I mean, I'm more inclined to think that if they get Theier, they're done.
Okay. And then just hold on to it and see.
Just see what happens.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to, this is a transfer window closed for basketball. I know football closes on the 30th, right? But
I thought it went a couple extra days for basketball. I could be wrong on that.
May 1st.
Okay.
Goes Wednesday, May 1st. The NCAA actually has a document that lists all of this. How helpful is that? It's very convenient.
I have to Google it every once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Men's and women's basketball closes on May 1st. So, and as we always say, that's the date when guys have to go in, right? If you get to that date and Pitt hasn't added anybody, that doesn't mean they're not going to add anybody. It just means nobody else can go in. So it's important to distinguish that it's like the exit door is still open, but the entrance is closed. You can't enter the transfer portal after that date. So, even if those two spots are still open next Wednesday or next Thursday, that doesn't close down all the activity. So we'll see what happens between now and then. I don't think, Zach Austin made his announcement. I think everybody else is pretty solid, right? You don't expect any surprises from the Twins or Marlon Barnes or Papa Conti, do you?
No, I mean, just judging by even social media activity, I mean, they seem all about Pitt anytime there's something posted. So those are, I know you're not supposed to like kind of read into what people say on social media, especially college athletes, but like you still kind of follow it. So, I mean, it still seems like they're all in on Pitt, and I'm guessing they're going to do some sort of announcement for the Twins. Like everyone else has gotten one. So I'm guessing they're going to get one too. I don't know about the redshirt freshman. Like, I don't know if Marlon Barnes needs to announce he's coming back, but maybe that's where we are in the world in college athletics. But yeah, I would guess like sometime this week they'll, and Alliance 412 will say, hey, the Twins are back, and everyone knows that already.
Yeah. I mean, we're at a point where especially basketball, when there's smaller numbers, it's like, well, if a guy's coming back, they'll tell us they're coming back, which is a weird kind of place to be. But you're right about not reading too much into social media activity. I mean, we could probably look back through the Twitter timelines of Deion Hayes and Solomon DeShields over the course of spring camp and see plenty of things there. Those guys both ended up, Hayes at Colorado, DeShields at Texas A&M. I don't think I'm not surprised about Hayes going to Colorado, because I think that was a possibility back in December. I know they were making a big push for him, and I don't know. I don't know if I had a guess on where DeShields would end up. A&M makes sense because I think they probably can offer a healthy NIL package, and I think that was probably the primary motivation. Did you have any? First of all, do you think Deion is trying to screw with Narduzzi by taking two defensive ends? I'm of the mind that no, he just wanted anybody who's been productive, because their defense was terrible last year, and they had nobody who had any. I think they had one guy with like 5 sacks, and that was a linebacker, and everybody else had less than that. So I think he wanted any defensive end with a pulse that he could find, and here was two guys at a school that he could pick off because he has bigger NIL budget than Pitt does. But did you read anything into that, or think there was anything personal between prime time and dues.
No, I mean, I think that whole beef is probably over. I mean, I'm sure they don't like each other, but I don't think, he was seeking out Pitt players just to do it. I mean, Dayon Hayes and Sammy Okunlola are pretty good players, and Colorado stinks. So I mean, that kind of goes back to a point we were talking about last week, where Dayon Hayes said, "I don't think we can win at Pitt." So okay, you go to the team that won 3 games last year. So you went from one 3-win team to another. They had 4.
They won
Oh,
4.
I
They
forgot.
won.
Oh,
They started off 3-0, and they won like their regular season finale or something like that. Yeah, they went
yeah.
4-8.
I'm not convinced the whole Dion thing's gonna get fixed this year, but like it might be a little more like the Pac-12 was really good last year, so maybe the Big 12's a little more forgiving and they win 5 games instead of 4. But like I'm really expecting this like great turnaround. But I mean, from their perspective, at least they're trying from just loading up NIL wise and just transfer portal and see what we can get. So I don't know if that's a great way to build a team, but I guess that's the only way you can build a team these days.
I mean, if you want to do it fast, and certainly if you want to protect your high-profile quarterback who just happens to be your son, you probably should go out and buy some pretty good offensive linemen, which I think they failed to do last year. And they also failed to really bulk up their defense because their defense was terrible, and that's why they ultimately went 4-8. Pitt's problems were largely contained to the bad quarterback play, whereas Colorado was bad in a lot of places. Haven't really seen anything yet on Christian Veyer or Antonio came in. I think. Was Veyer in the portal by the time we talked last week?
I believe so.
Yeah, but I don't know if Kamen was. I think he was later in the week. And then this week, Israel Polk and Cole Mitchell. Mitchell never saw the field. I had some optimism about Polk. It seemed like they talked him up a little bit, thought he did well. And it seemed like people around Pitt were surprised by how good Polk was looking in practice. So I was a little surprised, but I think we always knew that not all 4 of the receivers in that class were going to stick, right? When they signed 4 receivers in that class of 2023, they weren't going to hold on to all of them for the whole time. So that was always kind of the case. Did you have Polk at the top of your list of guys you expected to transfer out of those receivers?
No, I mean, of the 4, I mean, I kind of figured he was number 2. At least that was kind of like in my head. Like I always thought like Kenny Johnson was the top of that group, then him, then Fowler and Seymour were kind of battling out for that next spot. But I don't know. I mean, I guess things didn't go well for him whenever Pitt added 2 wide receiver transfers, in December, who are both smaller guys, kind of his position. So I mean, I don't know where he was going to play this year. I mean, at best, he's the 6th receiver on this team. So I mean,
Yeah.
I could see maybe trying to move on, get back closer to home, something like that. So I don't know. I mean, it's not a huge loss. I mean, he had 1 catch last year.
Yeah, exactly. That was more about the future than this season. But well, I mean, you knew guys were going to go, and I think more guys are probably going to go. I mean, I think a few more will leave before this is all said and done, before the portal closes next Tuesday. On the basketball front, Pitt Chag wants to know chances they invite Will Jeffress back if he doesn't find a good spot and they still have that 13 spot empty. I think you could do a lot worse with your 13 scholarship than bring back a kid like him. Would you agree?
No, I'd agree. And like, I don't think he was forced to leave or asked to leave. I mean, I think whenever he walked at senior day, I mean, I think Capel even said after that game, he's like, this is just, we don't know. Like, he might as well walk right now because you just don't know. So if he wanted to come back and Pitt had a spot, and they would take him. I mean, there are games where I mean, there are games that he helped them win. That Wake Forest game, they don't beat Wake Forest without his defense on Efton Reed. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I still think he can be, not like a huge contributor, but there's a couple games a year where he could really help you out.
Yeah, he can play for sure. I agree. You mentioned Elijah Hawkins. Jason Weinberg, I think, probably tuned in right after you mentioned that. He said it was reported Pitt staff reached out to Minnesota transfer guard Elijah Hawkins. What are your thoughts on this? Would this be a good alternative if it doesn't work out with Theier? Any other names to keep an eye out for? I think you made the point. I mean, I think it's going to be really hard to get a guard at this point with Jalen Lowe, Ishmael Leggett back, Brandon Cummings coming in, and then Damian Dunn joining. I think any chance you had of getting another point guard or another guy who could handle the ball, I think pretty much went out the window when you added Dunn, because that whatever minutes might have been left over from Lowe, you pretty much took them all up with Damian Dunn. So I don't see them. They can kick the tires, they can reach out, they can make contact, but I don't see them having any success getting another quality guard out of the portal. Do you?
No, I mean, it's just going to be a tough sell with playing time. I mean, I think you hit on those major points, and I think they had a little bit of trouble with that last year because they had multiple guards, and I think they have 3 guards this year, and I think Brandon Cummings is going to play, and shout out to him. I think he was named State Pennsylvania Player of the Year today, so good
Yeah.
on him, and I think good things are going to happen for him. But once whatever happens with Theier, I mean, I think we'll probably have to. I'm sure Pitt has a better idea, but like you and I will probably have to go back to the drawing board and figure out who their next target is. I mean, like that's kind of who we're kind of waiting on. I don't know if there's any other obvious candidates right now. I mean, I think we've seen them reach out to a bunch of players, but like I don't think there was any visits last weekend, and I don't know if there's one set for this weekend unless the
Yeah.
Arrow sneaks into Oakland.
Right. And I sort of got the feel that after they got Corn and Dunn, they felt like they had, for all intents and purposes, a full roster. That they weren't still like, wow, we need this one other piece. They want other players. You know what I mean? They want to add a quality guy, a good player like Theier or someone like that. But I think if that was where it ended, I think they would have felt good about the roster that they had. So it's not like they're like, oh, you've still got to fill that spot. I mean, people don't want to believe that they would be content to go into the season with the Diaz-Graham twins as the 2 options at power forward, but I think they're comfortable with that. And so, it can be a best player available, I think, type of approach. Now, to your point about the guards too, I think they did run into trouble getting guards last summer. And that was largely because guard candidates looked at Pitt's roster and saw Jalen Lowe, Bub Carrington, and Dior Johnson and said, Coach, I don't know where my minutes are going to come from. You compare that situation to this year, I think it's even tougher to sell because those 3 guys at least hadn't played. I mean, there was at least some possibility that maybe they won't pan out, or, you don't really know what you have. You could sell it on like, well, we don't know. We don't know how Jalen's going to do or Bub's going to do. Now you've got Jalen coming back after a great freshman season. You've got Ishmael Leggett coming back after a great year. You've got a transfer coming in from a high major who played at Temple before that and was really good at Temple. Like, you have a bunch of guys that have tape on them. And so a transfer is going to look at it and be like, tell me again. And you've got a 4-star freshman coming in. So tell me again where I'm going to play here, Coach. You've got these 4 guards. Like, remind me. And I don't think Jeff Capel's recruiting pitch is going to be like, no, but it's okay because every year somebody flames out for us. Like, somebody gets arrested or somebody gets hurt. We promise we'll find time. We don't know how it's going to happen, but somebody's going to screw up or get hurt. I don't think that's a very good recruiting pitch. And I, don't think there's going to be anything. Yes, I don't think there should be anything that happens with these guys. But Pitchag has a good question regarding the guards. Assuming they don't add any other backcourt guys through the portal, what are your expectations for Cummings next year? I actually said this on the boards. I feel like the addition of Damian Dunn, it really puts Brandon Cummings in an interesting spot where he can now, and I feel like we might have even talked about this at some point in the past, he can get all the minutes he earns. He's not going to be forced into playing time. He's not going to have to play because they have nobody else. He's almost like a luxury now. And if he's ready for 20 minutes per game, he can play 20 minutes per game. If he's ready for more, if he's ready for less, he can play whatever. I think it's a really good spot because they can be more almost judicious, I guess, about how they use Brandon Cummings because they don't have to, because they got Lowe, Leggett, and Dunn. They know they can ride with 3 guards. They did it this past season. And so I feel like it benefits Brandon Cummings and it benefits how the coaches use Brandon Cummings. And he can just get whatever he earns. And I think he's going to be really good. I think you've said before that you're pretty high on him as well. So, I mean, this question about what are your expectations, I think he's going to play. And I think it'll be a 4-guard rotation. He might be the low man on that 4-guard rotation, but I think that can still mean 18 to 20 some minutes per game. Don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think he has a spot, and I think he's a little bit better than his ranking. I mean, he just got that 4-star bump, but I mean, I think it took him a while because he committed to Pitt so early and never really got any offers, and he was just kind of locked up. But I mean, I think last summer on the AAU circuit, like if he was uncommitted, he would have added a bunch of more offers. He probably would have been a 4-star, more recently than just last week. So I think he's a good player. And I watched that team a couple times, and it's an interesting dynamic because you would think he would play a little bit more point guard, but Malik Thomas kind of does a lot of the facilitating and he plays off the ball. So I think, everyone's kind of wondering, does Pitt have enough shooting? Do they have this? I mean, I think he can shoot. I think he can help them in that regard. I don't know if he's going to be like, a great lockdown Greg Elliott right off the bat, but I mean, I think he's going to be one of their better threats, and I think he's capable of knocking them down.
That was exactly what I was going to ask you next, of like your thoughts on Brandon Cummings as a primary shooter. You know what I mean? Like a guy who can be, coming off the bench. I feel like even like an Ashton Gibbs or somebody as a freshman was able to fill that role of coming off a bench, being a spark off the bench. We're gonna both look up Ashton Gibbs's stats. And see what he did as a freshman, because I have a memory of him as
he didn't would have been on like
game.
Yeah.
He didn't start a game, but he came off the bench, played 10 or 11 minutes per game, shot 44% from three, and made like 1 3 per game. So he made about 35 threes. Yeah, he was 36 of 82, 44% coming off the bench. I mean, that's average 4 points per game, but like he came off the bench and added a different element. He I would have to look at the rest of that team's stats to see if they had another good 3-point shooter, but it was another element. And I think Cummings can play more than 11 minutes per game and probably make more than 1 3 per game. I think he's that good of a shooter. And that just gives you that spark, that shooter that comes off the bench and can really add some juice, knock down a 3 or 2, and all of a sudden, boom, and you got a little extra energy. And again, because they added Dunn, they can use Cummings that way. They can be specific and intentional about when they roll him out there. It's not going to be Bub and Jalen who have to play because they're the only guys that they got, or Xavier and Trey McGowan's, they have to play because they're the only guys. This is more depth than they've had in the backcourt ever under Capel. I mean, well, I guess no. I mean, they had Cummings, Burton, Sabandi, and Elliott. So it would be comparable to that. You would still take that backcourt over this one, right?
I still need to see this one play, but I mean, yeah. I have high hopes for it. I mean, I think Jalen Lowe is going to be a really good player as a sophomore. So I don't know. Maybe at the end of the year, that's more of a debate. But right now, that backcourt from 2 years ago was really good. I mean, they won a lot of games because they had 4 really good guards that can do things. And I mean, I think this year's, as the team is right now with those 11 guys, I think there's a lot of mixing and matching they can do. They can go big. They can play Guillermo at the 4, and you could do Zach Austin at the 3, and only have a 2-guard lineup instead of a 3-guard lineup. I mean, I think there's just like a lot of different things they can do this year, and I think they can, if they get Theier, I mean, that could be one of the best defensive teams Pitt has had since they left the Big East. I mean, I think they really have that kind of capability. I mean, Damian Dunn went to Houston, and Houston is like the new age Pitt from 15 years ago. Like, they didn't recruit him on accident, so I'm guessing he can really defend. So I think this team could be really good defensively. So they might be a little different than these past 2 years where there's just threes flying every which way. That might not happen this year, but they might be a little bit more efficient on offense and a lot more difficult to go against defensively.
I saw interesting stat. The one thing about those the guards, 4 guards versus 4 guard, from 2 years ago versus this season, that thought just popped into my head and I threw it out there. But that team had like 4 senior guards. This team has a sophomore, a freshman, and two like older players. So there's a big difference there between having like Nike Sabandi being your guy off the bench and Brandon Cummings, who's a true freshman. Not that Cummings, not on like a talent level, but just in terms of experience. But I was looking at Zach Austin's stats after he announced he was coming back. He made 28 threes last year. 7 of them came in the final 5 regular season games. He shot like 7 of 14 from 3 in those final 5 regular season games. I think that's interesting because I think he can, like, a little more consistency. You know what I mean? Like that kind of, Ashton Gibbs type of thing of like 36 to 40 made threes over the course of a season. If he could get around there, like, I think that's just another element that opens things up. Now, I could see Austin, conversely losing minutes as these guards just force their way onto the court. Well, Lowe and Leggett, obviously, but Dunn and Cummings on top of that. But if Austin could add a little bit more shooting from the outside, a little more consistency, I just like, do you see them ever, running offense for Zach Austin? And I always talk about like Zach Austin, like chaos points, because I feel like that's where his offense comes, is like second chance opportunities, putbacks, transition, loose ball, scramble, weird stuff. Like, are they going to run without Blake Hinson, right? Where they're going to have all these like 3-point plays to run for other guys. Do you think they'll run 3-point plays for Zach Austin? Should they run 3-point plays for Zach Austin?
I don't know if they'll run them, but I mean, I think those scenarios, whenever like, Low and Leggett are going downhill and he's, kind of parked out on the perimeter, he needs to be able to knock them down more. I mean, he was I think in 2 seasons at High Point, he was shooting 34%. And this past year, he shot 29%. So if he can get above that 29%, get kind of closer to that 34, I think that would open up a lot of things for this team. But I posted on the board the other day, like Zach Austin's just a very unique guy. I mean, he has 1,000 career points, 500 career rebounds, 100 assists, blocks, and steals. I mean, he can do a little bit of everything. And I think that was one of those stats like Pliz sent us, like Zach Austin's one of only 12 players in history to have this kind of stat line. But like, yeah, I mean, he could do a lot of different things. And I mean, I think they just need him to kind of fill the stat sheet in a lot of different ways. But a lot of it comes down to like, he needs to get above 29% from 3. He needs to he just needs to improve there.
Well, maybe the way he finished the season, like I say, shooting 50% in the final 5 regular season games, maybe that can be a harbinger of things to come. This is sad news. Did you see this about David Andes? David Andes is gone. Do you know David Andes? I mean, did you go to David Andes?
No, I mean, I know it. I know it's just another lost soul in Oakland. There's not much left.
Yeah. I can't wait to see what kind of nonsense they put in there. But Voodoo IPA says, with David Andes gone, another institution is gone. Do you bring back CJ Barney's or Schlotsky's or the Cathedral Roy Rogers? Did you ever experience anything at any of those places, Jim? Barney's, Schlotsky's, or the Roy Rogers?
I think my mom worked at the Cathedral Roy Rogers, if that
really?
If that counts for anything. So.
No kidding. I felt like that was one of the few Roy Rogers I ever saw that wasn't on the Turnpike.
I don't seen them on the Turnpike.
Exactly. And in the Cathedral basement. I mean, it was the only places that I ever saw them. But it's not like I ever liked eating, though. I can't say I was a big Roy Rogers fan, but I worked at Schlotsky's, so I don't. I have fond memories, but they're not necessarily of like the culinary variety. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and Barney's, I never really went to CJ Barney's. That was never my thing. I don't know. I don't know what institution I would bring back. I mean, probably Fuel and Puddle.
Yeah, that would be great. I bet whatever they bring back at Dave and Andy's, it's just going to be like what is it? Piles?
Yeah, it's gonna be nonsense like that. Like these places that have like melted or whatever, and they chicken and they do the apostrophe instead of the E at the end. So like this place will probably be another ice cream place, and it'll be called like Creamed, but with like an apostrophe instead of the E, or iced or something like that. Coned or cones with a Z on the end. It's gonna be something stupid, and it's gonna be fine, but it's I don't know, whatever. Or actually, it's weird because I think there's like a Rite Aid up on Forbes, and then a Rite Aid like that David Andes I think was surroundred by Rite Aids, and so I think Rite Aid will just take over the whole block, and it'll just be a whole block of Rite Aids.
Super Rite Aid.
Yeah. All right. Swim Void says, on the football side of things, is there any inclination on who of the new coaches will be the big recruiters? That's a good question. We're getting some feedback from recruits with the coaches out on the road here. I think there's a lot of energy. I think because there's so many young guys. You know what I mean? Jacob Bernowski's young. JJ Laster's young. Lindsey Lamar is young. Cade Bell is young. You all right there, Jim?
Yeah, I dropped my phone.
Oh, geez. You shouldn't be playing with your phone during the show. Don't be distracted.
I could be missing a transfer portal entry, a commitment, anything. I have to check my phone.
That's why you need a watch that will show up so you can just like, look, you can't even, well, now you can tell that I'm looking at it. But anyway, the hell were we talking about? Oh, the young recruiters. I think they have a lot of energy. And I think sometimes so much of recruiting can be energy and just working hard. I mean, back in the day, people would always ask me, like, what makes Jeff Hafley such a good recruiter? It's because he was tireless. What made Tim Salem a good recruiter? He was just tireless. He worked endlessly. And I think some of these guys seem like they have that same kind of energy. I think Bronowski seems like he has that kind of energy. I think Cade Bell does. I get a little bit of that from Laster and Lindsey Lamar. So I don't know, maybe one of those guys, but the energy is the first part of it. You've got to have that nonstop work ethic, but then you also have to be able to connect with the guys and build those relationships. I haven't really gotten a great feel for that yet, but anything jump out to you there?
I mean, it sticks out a little bit for me with Lindsey Lamar, just because of the areas he's recruiting, because he's in the DMV and he's in kind of that Tampa area, and those are two pretty prominent areas that Pitt typically recruits. So the fact that he's just brand new on the staff, jumping into two very prominent areas, and looking at some of the guys they're having lined up visit, for officials in June. I mean, yeah, I mean, it tracks, and I think with Cade Bell, I think what you're going to see from him is a willingness to recruit. Not, Pitt has had some offensive coordinators that they kind of recruited their position and sometimes didn't even do that much. But yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see him offering wide receivers and running backs and being involved and doing those kind of things. I think you're going to see a little bit more from the offensive coordinator position. Bronowski, his thing was like he was just in Texas and he just offered a lot of dudes from Texas, and some of them are visiting for officials. They're spending a weekend in Pittsburgh, so that's interesting. But yeah, I don't know who it's going to be just yet. But I mean, I do, Lindsey Lamar, I'm intrigued by just the fact that he's working some important areas and getting some good guys to visit.
Yeah. And I think he's got connections in some places. You know what I mean? I think a lot of the time he spent with Charlie Strong, he wasn't always like coaching a position. And I think that put him in a unique spot to maybe be able to connect with high school coaches a little bit and maybe make some of those outreaches. So I'd be curious to see. I kind of agree with you. I'd be curious to see what comes out of that. It's already almost 10 till. I did want to talk about the NFL draft here because the last 3 years were really good for Pitt in the NFL draft. 14 guys drafted over the last 3 years, 2 first-round picks, another one if you want to count Jordan Addison. This year is a step back. I was looking at Walter Football, and their mock draft that they did, a 7-round mock draft yesterday, had Mac and Salves going in the 4th round to Seattle at 118. MJ Devonshire going to Buffalo in the 6th round at pick 200, and Bub Means going to Cleveland in the 6th round at pick 206. I like the MJ Devonshire to Buffalo thing, keeping up the Pitt DBs going to Buffalo. Yeah, with Hamlin and Jackson. It's a fall though. I mean, like this is a pretty big fall from what the last 3 years have been. And you're not always going to, if you're Pitt, you're not always going to have a ton of guys getting drafted, but I don't know, like what what are your takeaways from kind of what Pitt's draft class looks like this year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued with Bub Means, and I always have been. Like since he stepped foot on campus, like I knew this guy was really athletic, and he proved to be true. And I know Mel Kiper loves him, and he's probably higher on him than most people. But I mean, I think the 3 guys that got invited to the combine, Gonsalves, Means, and Devonshire, they'll get drafted. I still think there's a world where someone might take a chance on AJ Woods just because he played quarterback at Pitt and he runs a sub 4.40. Someone might, kind of fall for that. But I mean, I look at the success though, and this is since the 7-round format happened these past 3 years, this is the best stretch Pitt has ever had.
Yeah.
Which is impressive. It's also the best in the ACC over the past 3 years. It is going to take a little bit of a step back, but I think they can add some things. And, I wrote kind of a draft preview for this week. And one of the things that kind of stood out to me was, what this team can add to the 2021 ACC championship team. Because that team has had 9 guys drafted, and Gonsalves and Devonshire can make it 10 and 11. So, I mean, I think that would be a pretty cool thing. And I think that just kind of illustrates that team was actually really good. It wasn't just like flash in the pan, like Kenny Pickett was a 5th-year senior. Like, no, they had a really good team. And I think that kind of points to it.
Yeah. They had, 3 first-round draft picks and, a bunch, like you mentioned, a bunch of other guys who got drafted. I looked back through like the recruiting classes that should be providing the like draft picks for this year. You know what I mean? Like 2019 would be guys who just finished their 5th year of eligibility. 2020 would be guys who just finished their 4th, or 2021 if they had any early, draft guys who went after 3 years. I mean, and there's not a lot. I mean, there were draft picks in those classes: Servassier Dennis, Brandon Hill, Eric Hallett, Izzy and Jordan Addison, obviously, and Kalijah Cansey. So you had some of those guys, but there's nobody left from those classes. And I think there's a little bit of it kind of speaks to some recruiting misses and recruiting downturn in those three classes. Like when you look at the fact that there's 3 likely draft picks and 2 of them were transfers, right? Only 1 was recruited in Gonsalves. I don't know. It sort of all lines up with maybe, those 3 classes, 19, 20, and 21, had some really good guys at the top, but not a lot of like NFL depth. You know what I mean? Not a lot of that sort of quality depth. And it's hurting them. And I think it had something to do with how they did last year. I mean, last year was ultimately about the bad quarterback play. It wasn't just about poor draft picks, but I don't know. Do you feel like it gets better next year? Because I'm not sure. I mean, we've talked about this, I think, at different times, but I'm not sure. I mean, like there'll be, I don't know. You think there's more than 2 draft picks in next year's class?
It's hard to say. I mean, but there's a world where guys like that perform well, like maybe Gavin Bartholomew, Branson Taylor, have really good senior seasons and get drafted and things like that. I think we used to count on Dayon Hayes also being a candidate for one of those, but he is now off the table. But I don't know. Yeah, DeShields too, and probably about a year ago at this time, we were probably saying that about Bengali Kamara. You were saying it about Bengali Kamara.
I didn't expect him to be back for this season. He was going to be.
Yeah,
he was going to be a day 2 pick. He was going to be
Yeah.
a day 2 pick this year. So
yeah, he should be getting drafted Friday. I don't know what he's doing in South Carolina.
I don't know. He must be training down there, getting ready for the draft, pre-draft preparations. They didn't even need to invite him to the combine. They're like, dude, look at you. We don't need to. We don't need to. Speaking of looking at guys, let me see if I can do the share screen thing again because. Oh wait, this is just my. Not dang it! I had this like photo of. Wait, nope. I can't find it. I had this photo of Bub Means where he looks like really jacked, and I was gonna show it, but I can't share that part of my screen for whatever reason. So never mind. But yeah, what do you run, a 4.43, right?
Yeah,
4.43 at the combine, almost 40-inch vertical.
39.5. Like he was built to like just be in the combine. Like he is just a created player. And you weren't at pro day, but I was there, and like I think he weighed in at 211 at the combine and showed up at Pitt's pro day, didn't lose any speed, and was like 228. And he's like, yeah, I could just add 17 pounds, no big deal. Like,
it's all right, a little bit scary.
That's a little bit scary. And I think Narduzzi made the joke. He's like, I think he's just been back in Pittsburgh and he's eating fries on everything or something. I don't know, but like, yeah, he is just one of those weird kind of guys. And I remember Malcolm Epps, we were interviewing him. I was like, what's the deal with Bub Means? He's like, dude, I don't know. Like he can just eat like a bag of hot fries and a sweet tea and like go out and do the NFL combine. Like he doesn't think twice about it. And we asked Bub about it. He's like, what'd you have for breakfast today? He just whips out like a bag of gumballs. He's like, I had some gum. I mean, like he is just one of the most naturally gifted, like does not have to do anything for it. It's unbelievable. And that's why he's going to get drafted. I think, is he going to go Friday or are they all going to go Saturday?
Like I say, Walter Football had him going in the 6th round. I know Mel Kiper is much higher. I feel like he, a team that has a late pick, so like a, playoff team, conference championship participant, something like that, who gets to like the 3rd round and feels like, all right, we don't have any glaring needs or don't love any of these guys. Let's take a flyer on a dude with a super high ceiling. Because I think he has a really high ceiling, but he's also got he's very much a boomer bust. I don't really see a world where Bub Means is just average, working man wide receiver. You know what I mean? I just don't see him settling into that role. I don't know if he's consistent enough to be that. I think he's a boomer bust kind of guy. So Al Davis would have taken him. Like Al Davis might have taken him in the 1st round. But unfortunately, Al Davis isn't around making picks anymore. So that's not an option. But I don't know. It seems like, it seems possible that somebody could go on Friday. I'm going to guess that everybody waits until Saturday. But I think Gonsalves will stick. I think he's good enough. I think he's a good enough player that I think he'll hang around in the NFL for a while. Devonshire is going to have to find a role and make himself useful. Bub Means, I don't know. He might kick around, or he might just bust out. I'm not sure. What are undrafted guys? Is there anybody who particularly sticks out to you that you think is going to have a good chance here?
In terms of like making a team, or
yeah, making a team and maybe having a little success.
You know what? I thought actually I don't know. I was gonna say, like, I thought, it was interesting at the pro day for Jake Cradle, because Matt Gonsalves brought like almost every team's like offensive line coach directly to his pro day. It was kind of like, yeah, there's like probably 15 like NFL offensive line coaches at the pro day. So I thought that was a good exposure for Cradle. And I think Gonsalves even said as much. It's like, I got all these guys here, but that's only going to be a benefit for him. And, he was what, like a 4-year starter. So I don't know. Some teams always are looking for a center. So maybe there's that. I don't know about anyone else. I mean, like I said, I'm pretty high on AJ Woods. I think there's an outside chance he can get drafted just based on his speed and the position he plays. And I mean, Marquez Williams just did not have a really good pro day, and he's already fighting the battle against his size. So I don't know what's going to work out for him there.
Yeah, that's. You would have liked to have thought he would have learned from like Jason Pinnock's pro day, and I think Damari Mathis had a good pro day, and he that's tough. I mean, like the blueprint's there on what you need to do and how you need to approach it, because I mean, Pinnock and Mathis were good players at Pitt, at least as good as Williams, if not better, and they still went and worked like crazy, and DeMar Hamlin too. And they still went and worked like crazy to get ready for the pro day and had a good pro day. And then there's guys like, and they're not the same in any way, but guys like Marquez or Paris Ford, who didn't really seem to take it all that serious, or didn't seem to put in the work, and they end up testing really poorly. And it's like, you've got some holes in your game that you can't afford to also test poorly. Like you can't do that. And they did. And I don't know if I didn't think Marquez was going to get drafted, but not really sure. Do you think he tested himself out of even a undrafted invite?
I mean, I think he'll get that invite, but I mean, like, yeah, if you're already like, all right, you're not number one just because you're short, like that's he's known that his entire life. But like, if you're running like 4, 6, 7s and stuff like that, I mean, like, you got to be on top of everything if you already have size working against you. So he didn't really do himself any favors, and like, I feel bad in a way, because like he's a good football player. Like, I think his like speed kind of translates to the field maybe more so than a combine. Kind of like Bub means it's just naturally gifted. I think he has to work really hard. It doesn't come as easy to him. But like, I think when it comes to actual football, I think Marquez is a pretty good player, and I think his numbers through the past 2 or 3 years kind of speak to that. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're 5'8", 5'9", and running a 4.67 40.
Yeah,
It's not good.
Your tape is good, but you needed to make everything else really good too, and you didn't. All right, I think that that about does it here. We'll see what happens on the Pitt basketball transfer front. We'll see what happens on the recruiting front, see what happens on the draft front, and we'll talk about it all next week. I guess when we get together next Wednesday, that'll be after both portals have closed. I mean, the football portal will have closed next Tuesday. The basketball portal will be almost closed, just a few hours away from closing. So we'll have some finality there on how many guys are going to leave both programs. Like I said, I agree with you. I think basketball is probably done. Football, over under 3.5 more transfer departures between now and next Tuesday.
Well, we know they need to at least have one more, I think. I think they're at 86. So
yep.
I'll say over. I mean, I don't know. I'm not like, this isn't like me saying like brace for something bad, but like they could have another like DeShields Hayes where it's someone they're not expecting. I mean, like that could very well happen. And there's probably 2 or 3 more guys that probably see their writing on the wall in terms of the depth chart. So I would probably go over 3.5.
Yeah, kind of surprised that a few guys are still there. There were a few guys that probably could have guessed would have gone by now, but that haven't. But oh well, we'll see what happens. But Jim, thanks for your time as always. We appreciate you hanging out. Everybody who tuned in for the live stream and the video and podcast subsequently, we appreciate you as well. Thanks to all the comments and questions, everybody who chimed in. It's fun as always. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com and get all of the Pitt video content you can possibly handle. And then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks for tuning in tonight. We'll have a more draft preview on tomorrow's morning pit, and then the mailbag on Friday. We always look forward to those. So tune in for that. Have a good rest of your night. Have a good rest of your week. And we will catch up with you next Wednesday night for the Panther-Lair Show right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.